Why are you here? Do you fear death? And are you fulfilled? Why is it that we're always striving to get more and more and more and more? Is there a point at which we've actually got more than we need?
And I do know a lot of people know that in their mind, in their head, that of course I want my kids to be happy. I want to be happy. But at the same time, what would society think of me if I do this? 嗨，大家好，我是 Sherry。今天非常有幸的呢，邀请到《世界尽头的咖啡馆：这一生我为何而存在》的书的作者 John Strelacki 来到我的频道。我对这本书很有兴趣的原因是，我觉得他针对了中年人现在会碰到的人生状况，做了比较深入的探讨。那其实这是一本故事书，在讲一个中年男性踏上了一个意外的公路之旅，在这过程中遇到了一个非常神秘的咖啡馆，问了他3个改变他人生的问题。我觉得这本书对于现在在中年对生活没有太多的不满意，可是却找不到人生意义的人，我很推荐大家可以看这本书。以下就是我们2个的对话。For those of you who have not read it, John, could you please give us a synopsis of your book?
Yeah, it's the story of a guy who's about 28 years old and is looking at his life, and everything is just kind of fine. You know, his job is fine, his relationships are fine, and he heads off on a driving trip to just kind of clear his head, get away from life for a while. And he gets horribly, horribly lost as he's driving and ends up at this mysterious cafe in the middle of nowhere. And he goes inside and sits down and he turns over the cafe menu, and there's 3 questions on the cafe menu. Why are you here? Do you fear death? And are you fulfilled? And at first he's like, okay, what have I walked into? This is so strange. But he starts talking to the people in the cafe, and by the time he leaves, he has a completely different perspective about life overall and about his life in particular.
When I first read it, I thought it would resonate with a lot of people right now because we go through life thinking, well, nothing's really wrong, but
Yeah.
it just doesn't feel right.
Hmm.
And we can't really put our finger on it. What exactly is going on? Why don't we feel that fulfilled? And I think your book definitely addressed that. Can I ask you, how old were you when you wrote this book?
Yeah, so I left everything behind when I was in my early 30s to go backpack around the world. And at that age, people look at you like you're crazy when you say you're going to go travel around the world with a backpack. Most people do it, you know, when they're 18, or maybe they take a gap year after university. But I had lived a difficult life. I had experienced a lot of challenges and traumas when I was going through, and had some dreams that were taken away from me because of some reasons that were completely out of my control. And so by the time I hit my early 30s, I was looking at life and thinking, okay, if I keep doing what I'm doing, in 10 years, I'm going to be like the people that were in my company that were 10 years older than me. And I'd be doing their job and I'd be living their kind of life. And not that there was anything wrong with them or their life. I just knew in my heart that it wasn't the job that I wanted to be doing. It wasn't the life that I wanted to be living. From the time that I was a little kid, I had dreamed of being an adventurer. And I wasn't doing much that was very adventurous. And so, like I said, I left it all and backpacked around the world for almost a year, and it completely changed my life. And when I came back from that experience, the story of the cafe flowed through me over the course of 21 days. And then it became a book right after that.
It's an inspiring story, and I did want to bring it up because you were not a writer before that.
Right. I was a
Um,
creative, a a creative that wasn't doing anything creative.
right, you were not a writer. You're just a creative person. You're creative at heart. You must have had some perturbation that made you drop everything. You traveled around the world, you came back, and you did this amazing thing in 21 days. And you were probably in flow.
Yeah.
You weren't really thinking about what would happen if people were going to read it. I don't know if that went through your head. You spent 21 days doing this and everything just happened.
The word you use is so perfect, that state of flow. And these moments in life when we allow ourselves to enter that state, you can't quite explain what you're being called to do. You just feel in your soul, you feel in your heart that this is the right thing to do. And what's cool about when you travel around the world and you're in countries that you don't know and meeting people that speak languages different than yours and you don't know the local customs, the biggest thing you have to trust on is your intuition. And
Mhm.
so I had spent a whole year doing a really good job of learning to trust my intuition and opening that channel really wide. And so when this voice inside my head said, hey, sit down and start typing. And even though I had no idea what was going to happen after that, I was like, huh, all right, sounds good. I'll sit down and start typing. And you're right, I didn't prejudge it at all. And at any time during the process, and at the end of the 21 days when it felt it was done, and I printed it out and read it for the first time, what was on those pages is pretty much what is word for word what's in the book. So it was very much a stream of conscious typing experience.
That's amazing. I was at a seminar 2 days ago, and one of the question was, is it too late to rebel in my 30s? And I
100%.
thought, I was thinking in my head, hey, listen, tune in, next week, John and
Mm,
I are going to talk about this. And I think you were right. When you say you want to drop everything in your early 30s, people tend to think you're too old for that.
right.
You rebel when you're a teen, but not when you're an adult.
Hmm.
But I completely agree with you. I think 30s to 40s is the perfect time to rebel, for lack of a better word, to try to find yourself. And I think that's what Carl Jung talks about, individuation, right? You're a perfect example of that. And it's the perfect time to rebel because you have your resources.
Hmm.
You gain enough of life experience to trust your gut, to know this is not right for you. And I think for teenagers, when you rebel, you don't know what you want. You just don't want the system. But I think you're a creative person. You want to be an adventurer. And based off of that, you were able to, based on the leap of faith, did what you did. And your story is an inspiring one for everyone.
Yeah, it actually ties into something which has always and continues to fascinate me, which is what is the point of the whole human experience? And so, statistically, you get about 28,900 days on the planet. And I always, as a little kid,
How many years is that?
it's about 79 years. And so
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I would look at adults and I would see that the vast majority of the adults that I saw and interacted with didn't like the jobs that they did. And so I found it really confusing as a kid. So let me get this straight. I'm gonna go to school for years and years and years. And I didn't really love school when I was a kid. And then I'm gonna end up getting a job that I don't really like. And I'm gonna do that up until I'm 65. And then maybe I'll get 10 more years of life doing something that I actually like. The whole system seemed absolutely confusing to me as a kid. But if you don't have any other wisdom about it, then you just sort of enter that system and you're in the system. But then at some point, and I think this is what happens often in the early 30s, is your friends are getting married, having kids, buying houses, people that you know that are older than you are getting sick, passing away, and you start to become very aware that time is ticking very, very fast. And if you don't start making some big changes now, then you're going to get to the end and probably have a whole bunch of regrets. And so that was the case with me. And this is kind of the coolest part of it all. I firmly believe that the cafe, had I have not demonstrated and taken the leap of faith that you said and gone off and backpacked around the world, I feel that the cafe would have chosen someone else to be the author. That I had demonstrated to the universe that I was willing to leap into this great endeavor, this great adventure called life, and therefore had demonstrated that maybe I was a candidate to be the one who gets to be a part of this story and to tell this story. But I think the story was floating around there in the ether, waiting for the right author to come along. And so I always say it's not that I necessarily wrote the story, that the story wrote itself through me, and I just am lucky enough to get to be a part of it all.
I love that. I actually got goosebumps when you were talking about it. The way you framed it as if the story is already out there. You just have to be aligned with the universe so that you can be the writer of that story.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I literally got goosebumps from that. So I think people do things differently, but at a certain point, you do want to step out of that, your reality or the system that you're in, to see a world from a different perspective. But
Yeah.
following up on what you said, you did talk about the fisherman story in your book, which is you do this, you study hard, work hard, and then you have enough money to retire. Can you tell us a little bit about this fisherman story, which I know some of the people have heard it, but I still think it's an amazing story.
Yeah, so this story actually came to me. I was in Thailand. I was backpacking around in Thailand, and I was staying at this tiny little place on an island off the east coast called Koh Tao. There's a couple of different Koh Taos in Thailand, but And I was staying in this little A-frame thatched roof hut and sleeping on planks in a little mattressy kind of thing that was there. And these people that were there were so kind and so open and so caring. And they had so little, compared to the life that I had left behind in the States, and what people considered little there was dramatically more than this man and his family had. And so I just distinctly remember waking up in the morning, and I came out of the little hut, and I was asking him about this particular fruit. It's got all kinds of little furry spikes coming off it. I'd never seen it before. It was a reddish orange fruit.
Yes, I know what it is.
Yeah, it's very typical in Southeast Asia, of course,
Yeah.
but I had never seen it before. And so I was asking him about it. And of course, I don't speak his language, but we're trying to communicate. And he says, hang on a second. And so he goes and he gets me this giant bundle of it and gives it to me. And I'm not asking for it. It was just pure generosity. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm not sure in my own country I've ever had a moment where someone who had so little gave me so much or anything like that. It just kicked off this whole series of thoughts in my head that why is it that we're always striving to get more and more and more and more? Is there a point at which we've actually got more than we need? And that's enough. For me, it took a year of backpacking around the world for me to sort of check this box that I needed to check emotionally and mentally. And so everybody's definition is going to be different. But I do find that if we're not careful, then we're always buying into the consumeristic culture that we're transported to through advertising and the billions that are spent on that. And I understand that world. I know that world. I was in that world. But if we're not careful, we buy into that world and we think fulfillment is going to come from those things, when in truth, maybe fulfillment is spending time with your kids at breakfast every morning and reading to them at night. Like one of my favorite memories of all time is that I read to my daughter every single night when she was little. And I wouldn't have traded that for any car, any difference in the size of my house, whatever, because for me, that was the most important thing. And that is the essence of the fisherman's story, is knowing what will matter to you in your life and then making choices around that as opposed to what everybody else may tell you is success.
Right. And it's so hard because, in essence, the fisherman's story is really someone saying, you need to really work hard, expand your business, and so you can have enough money to retire. So you can sit by the beach and spend time with your family, look at the sunrise and sundown every day. And the fisherman saying, I'm doing this right now. I don't need that money, right? It's a very simple story, but it does make you think. What are we working towards? I will say this, especially in Asia, the collective consciousness is not to work for yourself. You are here to fulfill your parents' expectation and everything you want in life. You sort of gather the resources so that your kid can live your dream life. And it becomes a cycle where everyone's living for somebody else, because you never get to fulfill your dream and you project that all on your kids. And your kids are born with that burden. Like, I have to do this because my parents spent all that money on me or all that effort moving to the right neighborhood or whatnot. It does make us think, like, what is it that we want in life? Is it for our kids to go to the best school or for our kids to be happy? And I do know a lot of people know that in their mind, in their head, that of course I want my kids to be happy. I want to be happy. But at the same time, what would society think of me if I do this? And it's that constant struggle.
Totally agree with what you're saying. What holds us back as humans from allowing ourselves to embrace that creative, adventurous side of ourselves is fear. That fear is embedded in, I think, the historical realities that our ancestors have faced. They have known hunger, they have known starvation, they have known what it's like to be sleeping outside in the dirt and the rain. And so that is part of our cellular DNA, and that a bit has been passed along where they sacrificed so that the next generation could be better and the next generation could be better. It is definitely a part of my story. I know what my grandparents, so only 2 generations back, suffered and went through growing up and living in the Great Depression. And at the same time, as we look in the future towards our kids' lives, I always think about this, that the single greatest role model for our kids is us. You can tell your kids, hey, this is the way to do it. But in truth, they're looking at the way that you do it and saying, well, if mommy is doing it this way or daddy is doing it this way, then I love and respect them. This is the way that I want to do it too. And so sometimes the great motivation to make changes in our lives is because we realize that's the way in which our kids are going to learn that it's okay to do something that you love. And not just okay because that's more fulfilling in life, but okay because the truth is, if you want to be successful in life, then what is the currency that really matters? It's minutes. It's not dollars or any other currency. It's minutes. So do you get to the end with the most minutes spent doing what you felt inspired to do, what you felt called to do, with the people that you love hanging out with, in the ways that you wanted to spend your time doing it? And here is where it gets super fascinating to me. When you think about it, so this is that's the right side of my brain. That is the heart, that is the passion, that is the purpose side. There is also the part of me which has my MBA from Northwestern University, one of the top business schools in the country. But this is going to make sense in a second here, because when you think about what career advice would you give a young person? And I've been asked to do a lot of university speaking and talk to a lot of kids that are 18 to 20. And my advice to them, Sherry, is pick something that you absolutely love to study. Because if you want to make more money in life, be an expert. And if you want to be an expert at something, you're only going to be an expert if you actually love the topic, because that's the passion that's going to drive you to learn more about it. Because if you don't love it, the person in the chair next to you who does love it is going to be more inspired to learn about it than you will. And the truth of the matter is that in this society that we all live in, experts and specialists make more money than generalists. And so the best chance for our kids to have an amazing life and to be very, very well positioned for the best possible career, whatever that is for them, is to actually pursue something that they love so that they get deep, deep expertise in it. And therefore, their financial future looks even better. So that is what I love about these two worlds uniting, when we allow ourselves to step back from the fear picture and really view it from, this is how the world actually works.
Right. I'm going to cut that bit into shorts because I think so many students and parents need to hear it. Here in Taiwan, a lot of people, when picking and choosing their majors, they look at the schools that they can get in, first of all. So even if I don't like it, I might want to go to the best school because at least I'm in that best school. And I hear this over and over again, and it frustrates me to no end. It's almost a common sense. Like, you have score that high. Why would you pick that major? Why would you go to that university? And I do firmly believe societies should have rules, but it's now spread into personal lives and personal choices where there are shoulds and everything. It's measured by matrix. And you bring up this great point where actually in our future with AI disrupting everything, you don't even know if we need economics or if we need it in an extent that we do now, right? Everything's going to look so different. There's a huge paradigm shift.
Yeah.
So all you can hold on to is your interests, like your core values. Because if you're trying to fulfill the outside world, you don't know what it looks like in the future.
Yeah. And again, you're going to be competing with someone who actually loves that. And there is no way that you, no matter how smart you are, if the person in the chair next to you is equally smart and they actually love that topic, they're going to outwork you. They're going to be creative, more creative than you. But the same goes if you put yourself in the chair where you actually have the most passion for the topic. Now you're going to be able to outwork and outthink and outcreate everybody else, or be a better collaborator with everybody else. Because there's nothing worse than being on a project that you're actually not that interested in. You're not of value to yourself. You're not of value to the team. But when you are passionate about a topic, that's how you inspire people to be part of whatever it is you're creating. And you're right. There's never been a better time to be thinking about rewriting the way that decisions are made, because there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. There's never been a better time to have a talent. There's a tremendous democratization of talent. Podcasting allows any person who has a message or a talent. Maybe they're creative, maybe they're deeply knowledgeable about science, maybe they're an expert on women's issues, and they're good on the mic, or even just interested in becoming better on the mic. For a relatively small investment, you can set yourself up with a broadcast show that 10 years ago would have been absolutely impossible. 20 years ago, completely impossible. And so I love the fact that these days, and you're 100% right, I think, with the AI assessment as well, it's less and less exactly what you know and more about how excited are you about the topic, how adventurous are you in the way that you're approaching it from an entrepreneurial standpoint. That to me is what's going to define whether or not you sort of hit these thresholds of success that everybody gets attached to.
Absolutely. And I started my show 3, 4 years ago, right? After my midlife crisis. So yeah, absolutely.
A good parent loves their kid more than anything in the world. So just when you think you've got it all figured out, the game changes. And so, yeah, you got it all figured out for yourself. You're 100% convinced that this is the way to do it. You follow your passion, you follow your heart, and you know that that's true. And then you have your kid, and it's through a different lens that you're looking at their life because you want to make sure that they have every possible opportunity. And I like that about life. I like that it's constantly challenging us and making us grow and really asking us, how serious are you about this belief system that you say you're really serious about? You know, at the end of the day, there is a conflict that goes on there. It is the, wait, I know the joy that I felt when I do something that I love. And I know that I can be successful at it because I look at my life story and that's when I've been most successful, is when I was doing something I was passionate about. Now you've got your kids saying that they're passionate about something different, and you're forced to look into a different type of mirror and have that same kind of conversation. And yeah, 100%. But we know from our own life experiences that that is what will lead them on the path to their greatest level of happiness and in all likelihood, their greatest level of success too. And I think this is one of the great societal challenges as parents, is to realize that like we and the child are there to help each other learn. It's not just one-sided.
Yeah. And it's sort of a Buddhist philosophy. I look at my 3 kids, it's like, well, they present 3 different challenges for me. They are here to teach me about life in different ways. The 3 questions that you wrote in the book: why are you here? Do you fear death? Are you fulfilled?
Mhm.
When you wrote that, did you have the 3 answers in mind? And have you changed over the years?
I didn't know, coming out of my adventures in my early 30s, I didn't have a good answer to why am I here, other than I knew at my core I was an adventurer, and I knew I loved the idea that I could make a positive difference in the world. When I was younger, I didn't think that was ever possible. I didn't have the self-confidence to think that I could ever make a positive difference in anyone else's life. I had plenty of my own struggles I was dealing with and didn't even think I'd get over those. So that's the answer to the first one. Do you fear death? What I realized in doing my trip was that we don't fear dying. What we fear is getting to the very end of our life and realizing that we haven't lived. And that's the great fear. And I think that ever since I was a little kid, I intuitively understood that. I didn't know what to do with it though. And so
Hmm.
coming out of that trip, that was very obvious. I just spent a year literally every single day doing something that I thought was absolutely amazing and intriguing. And I actually had an experience where I thought if it all ended today, like I'd be okay with it. Like I'd like to live longer, but if the story ended now, I have done so much on this adventure. I have seen so much. I have experienced so much that I feel like I've lived a significant chunk of the life I was supposed to live. So
Hmm.
that really cemented that one for me in a beautiful way. And then the Are You Fulfilled? I realized that I wasn't living life in a way that I found fulfilling before I went on my adventures. And now having just experienced what that feels like of feeling fulfilled, that was going to be the great challenge because I came back to quote unquote reality. I'm almost out of money. I need a job of some sort. I don't know what my new life is going to look like, but I do know that having tasted fulfillment, I didn't want to go back to a life that felt unfulfilling. So it was a work in progress.
That's great. And I did, in the end, want you to talk to my audience, especially regarding one question, which is, you ask us to step out of our comfort zone, right? Seek what we really want in a leap of faith. This is a
Hmm.
real question, by the way. But how can I support myself? It's
Hmm.
easier for you to say. And I've been asked this question a lot, and which is why the time that I answered it was 30s is a great time for you to do it because you now have enough resources,
Hmm.
right? You can balance it rather than I'm just going to go explore the world and spend my parents' money. but I know that you have a better answer than mine. So, what would you say to someone like that? Like, I'm in my mid 30s, 40s, or even early 50s. I do not feel fulfilled. Nothing's wrong with my life. What do you suggest that I do?
Yeah. So first of all, I love your answer, and I think it's a great answer. I will add my twist on your answer, which is this can be a dramatic decision. So mine was a dramatic decision. I said, I'm going to leave it all behind. I'm quitting my job and I'm going to leave it all behind and go. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. You can do this in stages where you say, I think I feel called to this. And so I'm going to take an online class about that and see if I actually enjoy it as much as I think I do. Or let's use a very specific example. This will sound a little silly, but what's an entrepreneurial type venture that somebody has said to you, oh, I think I might want to do that? Can you think of one that comes to mind that somebody has said to you?
Well, I think a lot of times people want to be like a podcaster, right? That's the
Right.
most common one. I want to be a YouTuber or a podcaster.
Okay, great. So I want to be a creative content creator in some
Right.
capacity, or at least involved in that space. I would say to them, what is it that draws you to that? Like, why does that feel like your dream life? I like to ask people to come up with 5 examples of people who are living their dream life and to write down what it is about those people's lives that makes it seem like a dream life. Is it that they're actually in front of an audience? And so part of the dream is that I want reach. I want to see my messages conveyed to others. Is it that they make people laugh? And that's really the thing that you feel called to do, is make people laugh, or maybe it's make people think, or it's sharing the expertise in a way that inspires them. And so
Mhm.
by identifying 5 people and writing down all the things that makes you think that's my dream life, you start to see patterns across the 5. And these are phenomenal clues that this is actually what the driving force is. This is what the motivation is.
Mhm.
And then you say, well, how did they get to where they got to? Like, who were they before they became that? And when you notice those 5 stories, you're going to start to see some patterns too. Oh, look at this. They all started off by launching a podcast first and then a YouTube channel. Or maybe it's the reverse. Or maybe they started off doing Instagram shorts and that grew into longer form content. But pretty soon you start to see patterns, and all of a sudden your brain is less resistant that this is impossible. It starts to be like, huh, I don't know, they did it. Like maybe I can do it. And then you start sampling little bit by little bit. Get a microphone and test yourself, listen to yourself and listen back. And what sounds funny? What doesn't sound funny? What works? What doesn't work? Step by step, you start to enter this new reality, and your brain goes from the single greatest barrier to this success to being the opposite. Now you're going to enjoy it so much that your brain is like, hey, hello, why are we not spending more time on this? Like, this sounds amazing. This feels amazing. This is what I call in the book the X on the treasure map. Like, once you know
Mhm.
the X on the treasure map, it is very, very hard emotionally, physically, psychologically to pretend it's not there. And that's a good thing.
Right. X on the treasure map. It's something that we've got to remember. And I completely agree with you. People have to remember it doesn't have to be that dramatic. You don't have to
Yeah.
drop everything, leave everything behind, quit your job, regardless of whether or not you have money. It's not that. It's really just take a step, right?
Yes.
Take a step forward. And that's really all we're asking. And I think what you said, it's important because you think you want to be a content creator. Because you don't know anything about it, you might fantasize it,
Hmm.
right? It becomes this perfect job, but once you actually try it, you might change your mind. We don't
Yeah.
know. Or you might love it more, but at least it'll be real. It won't be a fantasy anymore.
100%. And maybe what you'll discover is you love the editing of the videos, that you actually don't like being in front of the camera. And so now, oh, that's a whole other career option for you. Now you want to actually be an editor. You don't want to be the person who's on the camera.
Right,
And
right.
so I totally agree with you. It's about sampling and opening up the possibility to try it. So it goes from fantasy to reality. And then when you find something that really starts clicking and that you feel drawn to, then start increasing the frequency, start increasing the amount of time you spend on it. And again, because it's the treasure map, you're going to be drawn to increasing that frequency and increasing that time. Your brain is going to want you to do that because it feels better than whatever the other things are that you're spending your time on.
Right. You're getting your dopamine, you're getting your serotonin, right, from that sense of achievement. You're going to create momentum, right? I think
Hmm.
momentum may be more important than motivation.
And this, I would love to hear an example from your story of where you've experienced this. I've seen this time and time again in my own story. When I'm excited and passionate about something and I'm talking to someone else about it, they get excited and passionate about it too. And they're more likely to help me because they see, wow, this means a lot to him. He's like super excited about this. This is what lifts his spirits. This is what lights his smile. And in general, I find that people are way more motivated to help you when they can tell it's that. If you said to someone like, oh, can you just help me find a job? And it's just any old job that you're going to hate. People don't want to do that because they think unconsciously, well, that's just going to make you miserable. I don't want to be part of that story.
It's really about my YouTube. It was during COVID. I'm always talking to my assistant about how to apply psychology in everyday life.
Hmm.
I'm always telling her, look at the dynamics, don't scapegoat people, right? Look internally what you're projecting. One day she said to me, well, it's COVID. Do you want to record a video about this? I feel like you're talking to me about it all the time. So that's how everything started. So I started recording during COVID. And I think for someone who is so afraid of failing and the fear of, stepping out of my comfort zone in my age, right? I got a reputation. I want to be just showing my face out there. And I think COVID was the perfect perturbation.
Hmm.
You've got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So I think that's how everything, the timing was right because I spoke so passionately about this all the time. Somebody finally said, just record.
Yeah.
Just record it instead of talk to me about it all day. I'll help you edit. And that's how this channel came about.
That's beautiful. And that is another great point, I think, for everyone who's watching to remember is that oftentimes we see the world through a set of blinders that other people who know us don't see the same blinders. They see things in us, they see potential in us that we are unwilling to acknowledge as there. Sometimes because, you don't know what's in anybody else's brain. So I always assumed when I was growing up that everybody was as creative as I was, like the way I could come up with stories and invent things. I assumed that's how everybody's brain works. Not true. Like there are people who are incredibly good at things that are very linear and architecture and
Mm.
schematics, drawings. That is not my brain. But allow yourself to hear from people around you that are good supportive systems. Like this is what you're good at and believe that and say, well, what could that lead to if I started to trust that and started to realize that that's one of my gifts and to let that out.
Yeah, that's a beautiful message. And I think the key word here is allowing.
Hmm.
A lot of times the blinders on, we put that boundary on ourselves. We've
Yeah.
internalized the external boundaries and internalized it. And we are the ones limiting our potential. Well, thank you so much, John, for your message and your stories. I love this book, The
Thank you.
Cafe on the Edge of the World. For those of you who have not read it yet, please pick a copy up at your closest bookstore or platform because I think so many of us, even if you don't know it, sometimes you sit there and you think, is this it? Am I fulfilled? So ask yourself those three questions. Why are you here? Do you fear death? Are you fulfilled? And if you have trouble answering those three questions, this is the perfect book for you.
I will add one closing thought because I know you often ask your guests, like, what's the one last thing you want to leave audiences with? And you
Right.
just summed it up beautifully. So I'm not sure I can add anything on top of that, but I'll try a tiny bit
And
here. And
please
that
do.
is going back to what we talked about before. This is something that came to me one day. And I think, oh, if I'd have only known this earlier in my life, that two things, I guess. One is I thought I was the only person asking myself, is this all there is? But I've realized in interacting with audiences and fans around the world that there's a whole bunch of us that are asking that question. We just think we're alone, but you're not alone. Like there are definitely a lot of other people also asking themselves that question. And it's okay to pursue that. And as you're pursuing it, this is the thing I would hope that everybody remembers. Every expert, no matter what they are an expert at, from the greatest scientists to writers to sports to personalities to actors to chefs, they all started off knowing nothing about what they became an expert in. And so if you are at the point in your life where you have a dream and you're looking at your life resume and you're saying, I don't know anything about that, perfect. You're in exactly the right point.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. We all started off as babies, really, right? Right.